Welcome and thank you for joining us for the How Federal Agencies Can Take the Next Steps on AI and ML webinar. I'm Kate Bergen, a senior technology reporter at MeriTalk, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. Before we dive into our program, I'd first like to thank our sponsors, MarkLogic, Progress, and REI Systems for supporting this webinar. I would also like to thank our panelists and the audience for joining us. Today, we're discussing the road ahead for federal agencies in their adoption of artificial intelligence and machine learning. We'll touch on how leaders can integrate these revolutionary technologies into their operations, and we'll also explore how policy, practical experience, and investments in IT infrastructure can help agencies make the best use of these technologies. We also launched a special report, How Federal Agencies Can Take the Next Steps on AI and ML, that coincides with this webinar. You can find it in the Resources tab. Now, I'm excited to welcome our guest speakers who will be sharing their thoughts today. We have Dr. Raphael Fricks, the Associate Director for AI and Medical Imaging at the Department of Veterans Affairs Maverick Informatics Group and National Artificial Intelligence Institute. We have Imran Chaudhry, the Chief Architect of Healthcare and Life Sciences at MarkLogic, and we have George, the Solutions Architect at REI Systems. Raphael, Imran, George, welcome and thank you so much for joining us today. Before we get started, can you share a little bit about yourself and your background? Raphael, let's start with you.
Sure, yes. Thank you again for having us here. So yes, my name is Raphael Fricks. I'm a biomedical engineer by training. I lead a research group for the Maverick Center in Boston. And our focus day to day is primarily in imaging technologies, looking at applications of artificial intelligence, deep learning, and so on in clinical applications. But in my role for the VA, I've consulted on or assisted with various different projects from our public challenges like the AI Tech Sprint, as well as our public conference, which was the AI Summit that I led in the previous 2 years. So thank you again for having me. Oh, and I should also mention I'm a contributor in research with various different reviewer responsibilities and publications as well.
Thank you so much for being here today, and thank you for your work at the VA. Imran, can you introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. Imran Chaudhry. I've been with MarkLogic for almost 10 years now, focused on healthcare, life sciences, as well as generative AI recently. That's only for the last year or so. But prior to that, I ran a company that did basically taught computers medicine. So looking at a full patient record and figuring out what's really wrong with patients.
Thanks, Imran. We're excited to hear your input today. George, how about you?
Thanks, Kate, for having me here. My name is George P. George. I'm a solutions architect with REI Systems. I work within the CTO group. I support growth initiatives, providing solutioning, thought leadership, and technical proposal development for cloud, app modernization, AI, ML, and data analytics solutions.
Thank you, George. Okay, so for our first question, I'd love to hear from each panelist. And Dr. Fricks, why don't we start with you? So federal agencies are increasingly integrating AI and machine learning into their operations. Can you assess their progress? What have been their greatest successes and challenges? And what additional steps should they be taking to fully reap the benefits of these technologies?
Well, I'd like to start by saying that, of course, I can't speak for every agency, but I think the operative term here has been transparency. And so for any viewers or listeners or whoever is listening into this interview, I think that the best resource is, of course, AI.gov. So there's a public page where federal agencies are putting out the information about how they're approaching AI. So it starts with the administrative actions. I'm actually glancing at it right now to make sure I have these lists correctly. The administrative actions that the current administration has taken to implement AI. There's also an AI talent surge. So these are hiring opportunities, trying to get more expertise into federal government. But there are also even, all the way up to, I think, visa opportunities. But if you scroll all the way to the bottom of this page, however, the main thing I want to point out is that there is a National AI Advisory Committee that informs the executive branch, but also the government use of AI use case list. So really to assess how federal agencies are really leveraging AI technologies, the best place to go is to look at this use case list for yourself and to see where it's being used within various different departments. I know the VA keeps a active list, and we'll get into that in the next couple questions. But I encourage all readers to go see for themselves here.
Thank you. Yeah. Imran, what about you? What have you seen for federal agencies' greatest successes and challenges?
So I would say in terms of biggest AI challenges are around making sure your data is of high quality and is as devoid of biases as you can possibly make it. It's secure so that you can you can present the secure data only on an as needed basis to the AI systems. Those are some of the key sort of foundational things that people have to really worry about.
And George, what are you all seeing at REI Systems?
We're seeing basically a lot of agencies actively involved. They're trying to simplify tasks, automate tasks, provide intelligent synthesis and large amounts of data. For example, at REI, we helped FEMA respond faster to disaster zones. We used AI/ML to analyze vast amounts of satellite images and social media to compare, before and after areas, and basically triage emergency response with automated resource allocation. Another success area is, for example, we helped USCIS use AI/ML to adjudicate asylum seeker applications. Whether it's are the documents right, are the fingerprints matching, can we automate that whole process, or even reduce the cost of the infrastructure? Those are some of the success areas. Some of the challenges we're seeing is ensuring transparency and responsible use of AI, addressing fears and concerns safe again for the workforce. Will our jobs be replaced? How will AI impact my future? Or even citizens concerned about privacy, misuse, and bias. Data quality is a big issue, as Imran just said, and also the high cost of deploying MLOps. You can build all kinds of solutions, but how do you take it to the next level? How do you make it feasible and cost effective? So those are some of the challenges we're saying. Regarding what are some steps they could take to reap the benefits, I feel that one of the areas is encourage the small and mid-sized businesses on how to participate and compete with the larger companies. Some that have a stronghold on the ecosystem. So how do you open it up so that there's more competition and more creative ideas coming to the government? How do you compete with an incumbent? So I think opening it up, democratizing, and providing access to declassified data, declassified processes, just opening it up into like a sandboxes so that other companies can come and bring their thought leadership to help the government and provide more competitive solutions.
Raphael, I'd love to get into some specifics of VA technologies that you're using over there. And I know you just mentioned the AI use case inventory. So can you give us an overall sense of how the VA is using AI technologies, especially in the medical field, given the agency's extensive role in providing healthcare? And what advice can you offer to other agencies in their own AI journeys?
I'd like to also connect this back to something that George said a moment ago, is that we have a number of different ways to vet technologies, including our AI tech sprint process is one of the public challenges that the VA offers, that it was included in the most recent executive order on AI, which are intended to be sort of a wide umbrella way for industry and other teams to really come and collaborate on specific projects. Now, that said, processes like the AI tech sprint have led us to the use case library that you can see through ai.gov. A lot of the use cases come to us as exploratory sort of concepts, maybe even a prototype. And then once they're vetted to a certain level of technological maturity, we may initiate pilots. And so that's where really a lot of our use cases come from. So on that note, I would say that actually one of the big hurdles for implementation of AI at the VA. In the past, it was infrastructural. Like, we have made big investments now in infrastructure that have national compute capabilities, having effectively data centers or cloud storage, cloud compute, I should say, to really execute some of these larger models. That's one thing that is developing rapidly. But on the other hand, I would say it's actually just the deliberate pace of medical innovation. Oftentimes we talk about why are applications in medicine so far behind on technology? But if you look at it from the development of medical technologies, the analogs we have are in medical devices or in pharmaceuticals, that from the discovery in sort of a benchtop experiment all the way through clinical trials to a approved medical device or approved therapy, that's usually a process of about 10 years. And so, and there's many opportunities through the clinical trials to find that the technology is not effective or does not consistently generate the outcomes that we're looking for. So it's really a dance of many different things. Is now the FDA is attempting to regulate AI technologies using a pathway similar to medical devices. We're starting to see some mature software as a medical device applications that are becoming available. And now, it's incumbent on agencies such as the VA to see if it's appropriate in our clinical setting. And that's really where we can start to lead in some of these aspects. I'm going to save some for some additional questions later. But once something is approved and it hits market, there are also questions about, with a commercial healthcare system, for instance, is it reimbursed? Is this something that we can really apply? Is it a best practice? And those are all questions that are still being answered for many AI technologies.
George, as a solutions architect at REI Systems, you help with the development of AI capabilities and practices. REI Systems says that society is, quote, only in the beginning stages of learning how AI can help government, end quote. What should be the next stages, and how can agencies determine where and how AI and ML best support their missions?
Thanks for the question, Kate. Government agencies are actively exploring AI, but they're all in different stages. So I like to refer to the Gartner AI maturity model because it helps the organization assess where they are and also provides a framework for where they need to be. And in the Gartner AI maturity model, some organizations are at the early awareness stage. They know that AI is there, they're exploring it. Some are in the active stage where they're playing with AI Jupyter notebooks or some libraries to explore some methods. Many are at the operational stage where they're actively using AI to solve a business problem or a pain point, such as with a self-service chatbot. Some have it a bit more optimized where they have teams and data scientists working that are aligned on initiatives that are aligned towards strategic goals. And there are some that are really advanced that are trying to make it more transformative for their business. So how do you get to the next level? I think it's important to know where you are. What are the pain points you haven't solved? Identify your goals and reimagine how AI can deliver service differently and in a better manner. So there, what we do is we look at the high impact applications that will enhance citizen experience and workforce efficiency. We recommend setting up an enforceable governance framework. And for this, we've written a white paper about it. And I can share that if they're interested about how do you provide a governance framework? How does that translate to enforcement within an application deployment? And how do you then train and generate awareness? We recommend that you not reinvent the wheel. Look at like the GSA's AI Center of Excellence or industry best practices that have implemented AI to transform the whole, how AI is transforming a business or an operation. Look at the AI readiness framework and then develop a roadmap that is tied to your goals and within and is in sync with your AI readiness. And then that should be applied towards a highly affordable, cost-effective AI infrastructure that is tied to your reference model, your technical reference model. I don't think you should do it independent of it because when you want to deploy AI to an operation, then it has to be scaled, otherwise it stays siloed. Those are the main points about how do you get to the next stage.
Thank you, George, for that insight. Imran, you focus on bringing quality data platform solutions at MarkLogic. AI is only as good as the data that powers it, and you mentioned earlier in this webinar that data can be a challenge for federal agencies. Do federal agencies have enough data to create effective AI and ML solutions, or are they drowning in it? And what advice can you offer to agencies seeking to effectively harness their data for AI and ML?
I would say they have enough data and are drowning in it, right? So both are occurring. Um, the way I would look at it is on the data quality side, typically most of the organizations that I've worked with have what we call a raw landing zone where they just start stuffing data and throwing it into either a data lake or a data fabric or a data hub, but haven't really looked at it and what its use cases are and and how to make it ready for those use cases. Um, you really want to take that sort of raw data and start looking at use cases and start looking at fit for purpose and start saying, hey, we're missing this critical field here, and that is not going to help us link this data set with this other data set, that sort of thing. And so the ability to run through tooling to look at your data, understand what's missing, fix what's missing, and then another really key aspect of it is a lot of your government organizations have subject matter experts. They have people that really know their data, that really know their applications, understand how it's currently being used, that sort of thing. What you want to do is you want to capture that knowledge in what we call reusable semantic graphs. And the reason why that's important is when you start asking AI systems to do tasks or answer questions, you want to present the right data to the AI to be able to answer the question. If you capture this knowledge of your subject matter experts and tag your data sets with that data, like this document is about this process, this document is for this kind of an application, and following this application, you really want to do this other process as well. Those sorts of things. If you can tag your data correctly, then it makes it much easier for the AI systems to use that data and answer the questions that you're going to want to ask of it.
The increasing use of AI and ML in federal operations has triggered excitement, but also debate about potential regulations and guardrails, particularly for generative AI, which creates content in response to natural language requests and came to public attention with the launch of ChatGPT. So I'd love to direct this question at all three of you, and Dr. Fricks, will start with you. The Biden administration's recent executive order on AI aims to seize on its promise while managing potential risks. How will this order help encourage AI development and generate trust in AI?
So one of the key provisions, I would say, in that executive order, if that's the proper terminology, is that the VA will be conducting 2 AI tech sprints per year as a consequence of this executive order. That's the request that's come down. And so we're currently in the process of planning, preparing, and we're about to actually engage in one of these first tech sprints, which is centered around reducing provider burnout. So this is burnout of our physicians, of our nurses, of all our staff that are patient-facing especially. And one of the key things that we heard in talking to these staff and working with our various different offices across the VA is that there's a lot of overhead now with documenting a patient encounter, with receiving other documents, and ensuring that everything is traceable. So the two tracks being offered in this AI Tech Sprint Challenge, which, by the way, people as of today can still sign up on challenge.gov. There's a public posting for the AI Tech Sprint Challenge. There are 2 tracks. One is to catch ambient dictation, so to interpret ambient dictation, either conversations between a patient and their provider, or even just perhaps the doctor wants to dictate their notes after the encounter. We want to look at technologies that can assist in automatically extracting the information from that encounter. And then there is a generative aspect afterwards that once we've extracted the information, we'd like to see if it can be used to summarize details of the encounter and reduce some of the clerical work, administrative burden that the providers are facing. The second arm of this, the second track, I should say, for this tech sprint is around our community care program that right now, if a veteran is unable to be seen or for various different reasons is not being seen at a VA, we can often refer out to other healthcare systems, other institutions. And then oftentimes the veterans will return to the VA for the rest of their care. So this might be perhaps an appointment with a specialist. Well, when the veteran leaves our system, they have their encounters over there, and then they come back with a set of notes. that we then have to in some way ingest and add to our healthcare records. So really, when we put this text print process together, we know what the tasks are, they're well defined. We look at these sort of end-to-end goals of extracting just accurate information, but then we have, I think, higher goals of trying to summarize, of trying to, otherwise use this information in downstream applications. Generative technologies in particular are very new, so it's way, it's much earlier in that 10-year process that we discussed in, I think, the previous question. And so the concern is with generative technologies, of course, that you can have insertions of information, or you can have all of these sort of undesirable effects because the generative AI does not have the training of a physician. So we will be using examples of those trainings to vet the technology for that application. And just to cap this all off, I would say that the process we take for evaluating these solutions to look at these high-end applications is all outlined by our trustworthy AI principles. This was part of a previous executive order, and it's something that agencies such as the VA and the National AI Institute within the VA have published extensively on what trustworthy AI means to us, what the principles we want all our technologies to abide by, and they will be verified in these solutions during the sprint process.
Leveraging AI to reduce burnout at the VA is incredibly innovative and incredibly important. Imran, what do you think about how the order can help encourage AI development and generate trust in AI?
So just looking at probably AI generated summary from Ernst & Young on the executive order, right? The key line is that AI must be safe and secure and require robust, repeatable, and standardized evaluations, right? So what does that mean? That means AI as we know it, if you just give it a question without giving it details or background, it lacks context. And if it lacks context, especially in the generative AI case, it will start making up the most probable answer it possibly can, right? And that's called a hallucination. So there's architectures out there that are aimed to prevent that. And one of those architectures is called retrieval augmented generation, where what you do is you look at the question or the task on hand, you get the private data that the AI can use to answer the question, you give that to the AI, and then also ask it the question. So when you do it that way, you're giving it a lot of reference data. You're asking it to answer a question, and then in the question itself, right after the question, you can say, and by the way, if you use any of the reference data, please provide the link to it. So now you can actually provide sort of a closed loop system where when the answer goes to the end user, they can actually double click on a link and check to see, hey, is this answer valid? Does it make sense? And what information did the AI use? You can also take all of that information and log it and have it as an audit trail. So that you can basically start taking a black box, which is the AI, and wrapping it with reasoning around it and kind of make it a quasi white box. And so that helps with the safety and the reliability and the repeatability. Another really good byproduct of being able to log it is that if questions are being asked over and over again, it makes no sense to generate that same answer 100,000 times. You can generate it once and then send it out 100,000 times, and thereby saving on power, compute, cost, all those kinds of things. So that's another very interesting scenario around repeatability and checking of the AI systems.
George, what are your thoughts on the AI executive order?
My thoughts are that it helps manage and minimize the potential harm. It basically gets the SMEs and the experts to not only just look at the outcome and the solution, but also keep in mind, how is it fairly being used? The security, privacy, and civil rights are maintained, and protected. So it brings to the forefront not just about solving the problem, but how do you solve the problem? How do you use the data? Is it authorized? Is it protected? Is there access being given to the right people? The SMEs know the technologies. So in the case of generative AI, as both Rafael and Imran have said, how will that technology be used in the right manner. That's what this executive order is doing. But how do you put it into place is it drives organizations. And I'd like to refer to this white paper we just published, which is there are 3 avenues to make sure it does get implemented. The first thing is the governance framework, which provides you with the strategy, how to do it. And then you have, you can put a structure around it with a governance advisory board and a team that actually figures things out and then provides the guidance for enforcement. And enforcement is where the applications are being built, the solutions are being built. And then thirdly is training and awareness. So you got these 3 avenues that make sure they work together to make sure the concerns and the objectives that I reflected in the executive order get implemented. So those are my thoughts. That one is it brings it to the forefront. It's not about the solution, but it's also how it will be impacting citizens and their concerns.
Thank you, George. Raphael, you've spoken about the VA's role in advancing brain health research and how AI and ML are helping. Could you elaborate on how these technologies are aiding researchers in understanding and treating complex brain conditions that may afflict the nation's veterans?
Yeah, so to begin with, the VA is the largest integrated healthcare system in the United States. We have over 9 million patients. Many of those patients are, I would say, disproportionately affected by traumatic brain injury. That we've heard as well that for recent wars, TBI is considered the signature injury. So in that sense, the VA is one of the leading healthcare systems, if not the leading, in terms of treating traumatic brain care injury, in terms of lifelong sort of assistance, developments, interactions with their doctor in general that a TBI patient will need. So in that sense, the way the VA treats TBI becomes oftentimes the clinical practice guidelines for how TBI is treated worldwide. We have some of the top researchers. We have some of the most dedicated facilities for TBI management. And we have a complete integrated program for TBI research. One interesting possibility that's emerging because of AI, and I believe I've spoken about this before, is that with many advanced types of imaging, there are patterns that are emerging that we're now able to get with advanced imaging, or I should also say other types of advanced tests, genomic tests and biomarkers and so on, that the patterns may be difficult to distinguish just looking at the data directly. So AI has been, I think, foundational in looking for these patterns and helping us in what we call phenotyping of TBI. So I really want to point to the work of my colleagues and all these different interagency efforts. There's the FITBER informatics system, which is the Federal Interagency Traumatic Brain Injury Research Informatics System. That's one place to see how various different government agencies all contribute their data, the research that's associated with it, and the outcomes that we've seen. And specifically for warfighters, we have Limbic Sensi. Sensi is CENC, but that is the long-term impact of military relevant brain injury consortium, chronic effects of neurotrauma consortium. So the idea there is that we're specifically studying in our veteran population what has been the impact, and there's various different research projects, too many to name here, of how the VA is studying how these forces impact our soldiers, what consequences it has in their, after life after service, that oftentimes they can be mild. But we do have some severe cases, and we want to ensure that veterans get the best outcomes in this sense.
So we've heard from Dr. Fricks on several examples him and his team are working on at the VA for applications of AI. But Imran and George, I'd love to hear from you. What do you think are the potential applications of generative AI for federal agencies? And Imran, we can start with you.
For federal agencies, generative AI is really all about language. It's about taking in language and generating language out. So it can be used in a lot of places where you're interacting with the citizens. So customer support, calls, emails, text, the ability to take that and combine it with complex process automation so that people are able to use natural language to collect data and also to sort of follow a chain of thought and drill down and collect more specific data depending on the answer of the previous set of data, right? Those sorts of things. So the ability to collect the right kind of data for the right use case, for the right person in terms of process automation. Another thing that's really coming to the forefront is summarization of records that have occurred, but combining that with also predictive analytics and next steps. So we think this person or this patient might be headed down this path. Here's some possible preventative actions that might be executable to help avoid these further negative outcomes.
George, what about you? What do you see as the potential applications of generative AI?
Some of what Imran said, like content generation, summarizing content, making customer service chatbots respond, be more self-serving. Also, in the development teams, their code generation, or even cybersecurity. I mean, there's some aspect where you can summarize stuff and look at synthesis of intelligence, large amounts of data. That's what we are seeing, some of the use cases, assistive coding. Those are the basic areas. We're summarizing, generating a response, looking at large amounts of data and making sure it makes sense.
Dr. Fricks, is there anything you want to add about potential use of generative AI at the VA?
Yeah, and naturally I tend to focus on more clinical applications, but usually the amount of regulation and oversight that's needed before we start to apply one of these new technologies is proportional to the risk. So if you look away from clinical applications at some of the lower risk or even non-patient applications, we also have applications in supply chain management or as I think George just pointed out, for instance, there have been efforts to improve the chatbots on our site to point veterans to valuable resources. And these supply chain issues, this week actually, we're doing an internal datathon competition to look at purchase orders that have been made within the VA. Anytime we're able to first classify purchase orders that may have been made inefficiently, and then use generative technologies to explain why these have been inefficiently, this can assist us in, identifying and fixing patterns of purchases. While that's not, a top headline, when you scale the number of inefficiencies that can be reduced in a system as large as the VA, we're talking about millions of dollars of potential savings if you can optimize our logistic processes. So those are places that I think lots of industries have gone after, that the VA is looking for a low-hanging fruit of things that are not clinically applicable, where generative technologies can assist and improve our operations.
And Kate, can I just add another thing is, I think in the medical field, the biggest challenge is getting the subject matter expert, like a cardiologist or an oncologist, to actively work with the data scientists and the data architects, because they all got to work in tandem. And that's a challenge because their time is limited. They're not easily available. So sometimes you see silos being built where the engineers and the scientists are building a solution, but then the expert, like the cardiologist or the specialist, is needed through the entire process of making sure the data is valid and usable and the solution actually works. I'd just like to add that.
Yeah, thank you for that insight. While the federal government is spending more on AI, some agencies have made more progress integrating the technologies than others. And I'd love, Rafael, if you could take a swing at this question first. What are some of the best practices for using AI and ML to improve customer service for constituents or military mission success? And how do these practices demonstrate leadership in the AI and ML space?
So I do think, the VA has been one of the agencies at the forefront of applying AI. That we are one of the first agencies to publish an AI strategy that dictates how AI will be used across the agency. We have been one of the biggest agencies in terms of informing trustworthy AI principles. And as of 2019, the VA has stood up our National AI Institute, which works across various different offices to improve our processes here. In terms of using AI and ML for customer service, that goes back to that low-hanging fruit in the sense that we want to use these generative technologies and chatbots and so on to help veterans navigate our services, help them explore what benefits might be available to them, help them better understand the process. And And I think that one of the real pain points, which is really not something I'm actively involved in, is the process of getting your sort of for veterans transitioning out of the military and into the VA for healthcare. And so those are places where AI can serve as a force multiplier, that it's not making a life or death medical decision immediately, but it is certainly helping us review cases faster and hopefully getting the veterans into care faster. Now, it goes a bit unstated, but I want to make sure it's explicit here too, that technologies like that would be used for triage, that they would help us, find the easy cases, but of course there'd be manual review of every decision made by AI. These would be traceable decisions. This is to ensure that, there is an explanation about why a decision was made, and that at the end of the day, this is to assist our staff in making their decisions faster, not to supplant their decision making. We are not at the point of really taking humans out of the loop. We just want to make sure that we can get to all our veterans in a timely manner.
And Imran, what are your thoughts on using AI and ML to improve customer experience?
So the key here is the main difference between what a customer experienced before these AI systems and after these AI systems is really a lot about customization. You can now, let's say you have a patient coming into the VA, he has 3 known diseases, right? You can have the AI chart out exactly sort of what conversation it wants to have with that customer or that patient based on the diseases that he or she is experiencing, right? So the ability to customize your workflow with AI systems is a game changer, because now you're actually very much focused on the individual as opposed to just trying to herd everybody who has diabetes into a certain path or a certain workflow, or everybody who has a concussion into a certain workflow, right? So you can start looking at, oh, he has a concussion, but he also has diabetes and so on, right? And the combo of two can cause different kinds of effects, right? So the ability to do that. The other place where I say it's really important is with these AI systems, if you're not careful, you can have what's called security leakage and patient leakage. You can get patient information into the AI's long-term memory that could then literally be extracted out by somebody who knows how to question the AI properly. So the ability to lock down the data that you present to the AI before you present it, either for training or learning, or actually during your operational settings, is also a really important aspect of how to go about making sure that it's safe and reliable.
George, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I think again, it's looking at how do you rethink the service delivery? What are the pain points you're trying to address, and using best practices like value chain or user journey mapping, BPR and HCD methods. Try to see, okay, how can AI transform that user experience, the user journey, and then looking at some of the high impact problems and impact areas that you can address, triaging or preparing a roadmap of applications that can be deployed quickly so that you're bringing in value. These are some of the best practices. I also recommend looking at centers of excellence so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Like the GSA Center of Excellence. I keep going there because I think there's a lot of good lessons to be learned, a lot of applications that have already been deployed, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So those are some of the best practices, I believe.
So we've talked about AI and ML a little bit externally and how it's affecting customer experience. I'd like to switch gears a little bit and look more internally on workforce. So Raphael, AI innovation requires extensive workforce training and upskilling, and numerous experts, including the National Security Commission on AI, have called for the federal workforce to be retooled for AI. Based on your experience at the VA, how effective have training efforts been so far, and what types of training are still needed?
So, of course, most of the technologies we talk about today, like generative methods, ChatGPT, large language models, these have all been developments in recent years. So for most people who work at a federal agency, or I should say have joined the workforce in general, unless they've joined in the last couple of years, it's unlikely that this was part of their their training per se. So, even 5 years ago, we couldn't have talked about these things in universities because they didn't exist. Now, that doesn't mean that we're out of date. Of course, there are ways that every professional needs to stay engaged and keep up to speed on the technologies. And that's why agencies like the VA have backed Aspire, which is a intra-agency collaboration for the education of our workforce, for the assessment of our workforce, which is intended to sort of serve two needs. One is that for individuals within the agency who want to understand where are they now in their learning journey and what should they do next to enhance their skills, they would hypothetically be able to take one of these Aspire assessments, which would then provide a personalized learning pathway afterwards, and give advice for sort of, these are the skills that, these are your strengths and weaknesses, and here's where you should go next in terms of enhancing your ability. But at the agency level, that also gives us visibility into where are the gaps in our talent. So, if we use a tool like this across the agency, we find that there, isn't a lot of expertise in natural language processing. Hypothetically, we do have a lot of expertise there, but that would be something that would be a directive for us to target our hiring. And so again, if you look at AI.gov, there has been a recent call for a surge in our AI workforce. So we're opening positions, we're trying to recruit new people to join federal service. I think the positions are quite comfy. I'm quite happy myself. But it's twofold, is that, we'd like to train people, we'd like to bring new people in. And for anybody interested as well, Aspire was the previous tech sprint. So we in the previous tech sprint, we went through the process of vetting platforms to be used for this assessment in Aspire. Lots of the findings, lots of the possibilities are out there in our previous demonstration, which concluded earlier this year. And so we're just looking forward to the implementation of Aspire across agencies.
Imran and George, you both bring extensive private sector experience in AI and data analytics to your current roles at MarkLogic and REI Systems. What lessons can federal agencies learn from industry, and how to effectively integrate AI and use it in responsible ways for the public good? And George, do you want to go first?
I think the big difference is what is the purpose and how public sector operates. The focus is usually about security and services, while the private sector is about maximizing the ROI for shareholders. And that drives them to be outcome oriented. So I think it would help for the public sector to look at outcome measurement also as part of their initiatives. Like, how are you bringing the impact? Are you transforming the life by rethinking the service delivery? Another area the government can look at is for looking at financial institutions and healthcare systems, how they provide efficient systems, transparency, explainability, basically providing the peace of mind so that every transaction is accounted, is transparent, and it all adds up. I think those kind of best practices can help the government provide better systems so that there's peace of mind with the citizens, so that they make sure that, hey, my data is being well used, it's not going to be used against me, there won't be a bias. Another area is providing a more centralized enterprise level data architecture and data strategy. I think the quicker you get to this data, the faster the value is. And in the government, there's so many contracts, there's so many contractors, herding everything together towards a unified data architecture or a data strategy is challenging. So looking at the private sector, how do they go about making it centralized so that AI can be efficiently deployed, overcome some of these silos created by different contracts, different teams? That's something we could look at and learn from. And then maybe create a center of excellence within each agency so that there's a centralized best practice. There's a resource to go to so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So these are some of the areas I feel could be very helpful.
Thank you. Imran, do you have anything to add?
Sure. I'd like to just add to George's thought about centralizing the data. Sometimes you don't have to centralize all of the data, but what you should think about is what are the key things that you want to use for your question and answer or the tasks on hand, and you may just want to extract the textual part of that data or the audio or the video part of that data as sort of the sort of base layer that you present to the generative AI systems. So it doesn't have to be a big bang. You don't have to sort of do everything in one shot. You can start small, figure out your use case, and apply the data that you need for that use case and grow it. So that's one thought process there. Another thing along the data side is there is an insane amount of data bias in the data just because of the selection of the people that were in the study, for example. In healthcare, I know, for example, a lot of studies are focused on white Caucasians and not on sort of other races and ethnicities. That data bias tends to leak through in terms of answers as well. So being really careful about that and understanding that and figuring out how to be more representative in your data set that you use, that's one. Then there's also what's really interesting is we've seen what's known as automation bias. Oh, the AI is recommending it, so let me just go ahead and agree with it, even if I think I should answer it a different way, right? So the people who use the AI systems should also be very cautious about just taking recommendations without investigating and understanding where the recommendation came from and why it came. And one way to sort of prevent both of these in a large scale automated fashion is to take that subject matter expertise and capture it in knowledge graphs and then use those knowledge graphs in an automated way to understand what biases might be creeping in and what answers might not match with what the subject matter experts understand and do on a day-to-day basis. Also, with these generative AI systems, you have data cutoffs. So the ability to take data that is more recent than not and present it to the AI system in a timely manner, like literally in real time, will help with providing more accurate answers. And in fact, I've had customers that have come to me and said, Imran, my older data is actually almost useless compared to my newer data. And I really want to prioritize my newer data and provide that as the high priority referential data to my AI systems.
Kate, can I add one more point? Imran brought up a good point, and I have a statement which I always think about is don't boil the ocean. And that's what we tend to do in AI. So be very focused and make it feasible. So good point, Imran.
And Dr. Fricks, this question is for you. How can agencies anticipate the computing and networking infrastructure that they will need to support AI advancements and use cases that we can't envision today?
So infrastructure is, I think, a continuous development that we need constant investment in our infrastructure. And for years, the challenge was showing that these infrastructure investments have an impact on our operations. Now with AI, to apply these latest methods, we do need much more extensive compute to apply this on several patients across the enterprise. And that's why we've been able to put much more investment into our VA Enterprise Cloud, our national data operations in general. Because not only is this a utility for researchers, but it is a resource if we ever want to deploy these technologies in a centralized fashion. So the VA today has much better access through the VA Enterprise Cloud to cloud resources that include GPU compute. And with this, we've been pulling together our data, curating it, and contributing to many public repositories. So famous public repositories like the Cancer Imaging Archive project with the TCIA, or the MIDREC, which is the Medical Imaging and Data Resource Center. These are repositories that have been the basis of many technological developments in medicine. The VA is starting to contribute to those, and we have our own repository through data.va.gov that hopefully we'll be sharing much more data soon, with, of course, respect to patient privacy. So I'll just keep the answer at that at this point to wrap this call up.
On behalf of MeriTalk, I'd like to again thank MarkLogic and REI Systems for sponsoring this webinar. I would also like to thank the panelists for their time today and the audience members for joining. As a reminder, the report that coincides with this webinar can be found in the Resources tab. If you missed anything, we are posting a recording of this webinar on our website, and we'll send all registrants the link to the archived recording. Thanks again, everyone, and have a great afternoon.